Hi guys, welcome to Learn with W3 Schools. My name is Dr. Zeeshan Bhatti. Today we are diving into ReactJS, a powerful JavaScript library used to interact with user-friendly interfaces. It allows us to create interactive web pages and make our web page a component-based architecture. We will start with the basics and work our way to the advanced concepts, ensuring that by the end you will feel confident using React to build real-world applications. Let's get started. Learn how to build dynamic, scalable web applications using React.js, the most popular JavaScript library for modern UI development. Here's the roadmap for today's session. We will cover everything from setting up a React to building advanced features and even deploying a React app. By breaking it down into clear sections, you will learn concepts progressively, and each topic will include real-world examples to solidify your understanding. By the end of this course, you will be equipped to handle real-world React projects. You will gain a solid understanding of React's core principles, learn to manage state, navigate pages, and even deploy your app online. Stick with me, and I'll promise it will all make sense, and I will help you around with understanding and learning React as easily as possible. So, what is React.js? React.js is like a Lego blocks for web development. Each block is a reusable component that you can combine to create complex interfaces. It's fast, scalable, and backed by a strong community. Companies like Netflix, Airbnb trust React, and by learning it, you are entering the world of endless possibilities. It is efficient and fast. It's a component based, means that everything is reusable, and every component itself is an isolated component that can be used anywhere in your code. It is developed primarily by Facebook, so do keep this thing in mind. So all Facebook technologies primarily are now using React. JSX is very important to React. Everything that we work within the XML basically follows the JSX standard. JSX makes React so intuitive. You can write an HTML-like code directly inside your JavaScript using the JSX. It is very important and it uses JavaScript syntax. It's simple, readable, and eliminates the need to manually manipulate the DOM. So in this example, we are dynamically greeting a user based on their name. Very cool, right? So what's happening now is that we have something called a constant element. This element is being given a value of HTML code. So now meaning that we have an HTML code that has been saved inside our element component. Now to use it, we can also use a constant and we create a function, and this is known as an arrow function. We're going to talk about it in a moment. So we have again a function that becomes our component here. So this component again is printing the name. Within this we have HTML content, and then we are using an expression to print this name value where we want our HTML content to be. So we are combining an expression here and we are printing this value into this block. Don't worry if it doesn't make sense, we're going to delve into it much more detail. But this is what JCS looks like. It has two different forms. We can directly print an HTML component inside an element, or we can use a function to create an entire HTML component. Now, React components. What do we mean by React components? Components are what makes React so modular. Think of them as a small reusable piece of code that represents part of your UI. So everything within our React is basically a component based. So when we work with components, it means that we create small Lego blocks. Those blocks can be reused anywhere within our components we want. To create a component, we simply use the word function, we give it a component name, and we define a block of code. Just like in previous example I'll show you, but that was just a syntax wise. So here we are creating a pure JavaScript component. This component allows us to work efficiently and create the reusable components. To create, you just simply need to use the function word, okay, and then you provide the function name, okay, block start, block close. We have a return statement because components always need to return something. That's a key thing, default feature of a component. So always remember to use a return keyword inside a component, and the component has to return an HTML content. So these are like three fundamental rules. We use the function word, we give it a name with the function. Then the second rule goes that you need to have a return statement inside the component, and the third rule is it always needs to return an HTML content. That's what makes a React component. That's it. That's the whole logic behind the basic React component. There are two ways of creating components though. One is by using the function. So this is function example that we just show you right now. The second is a class component. Class component is the older way of creating React components. However, nowadays most preferred method is by using a function components. They are more simpler, more easier, and more basic ways to create. Now let's see one more example of creating a component. So here we are creating a simple header component to display a website's title. To do that, again, as I said, the first rule, we create a function. We gave it a name called header. Again, this can be any legal name as per JavaScript's rule naming standards. Block start, block close. It needs to have a return statement, and then it needs to return the HTML content. So this adds up to creating a whole complete component within our code. That's it. That's simply how we define a simple components inside our code. Now, when we create components, we need one more thing called props. Props are generally known as arguments when we are creating functions in JavaScript, or you're coming from any other programming language though. Props are like arguments you pass to a function. They let you customize components based on the data you provide. So in this example, we are passing a name to greeting components and React dynamically fills it in. So we do create a function, name it a greeting, so it becomes a component. Now see this, here is what props are. So in a general sense, we call this as arguments, but in React, we call them props. So when we use the return statement as compulsory in the component, we provide an HTML code again as a component. Now what we're doing is we are using this props.name. So this name actually is the key here, key value. This name is coming from this component here. So when we want to call the component, this is again component declaration. We call this that we have declare a component. This is what we call the calling function. So this is how we actually call the component. So you only need to declare the component once, and you can call it as many times as you want. To call a component, you would use angle brackets and the component name. Since this needs a prop, so we give a key and its value. So this becomes our value. So this is our key, this becomes our value. That's how we pass an argument to our components in React. To do that, again, we are using name is equals to our value, which is again key value pair. Hence, when I call the prop, we use these curly brackets. They are known as what we call expressions in React. This curly brackets indicates JavaScript expressions. Within it, we are calling this props.name. So this name is actually coming from this value here. So now it means that we are accessing the value. So when we use the props, this props variable dot name, this will automatically contain this key and its value. Hence it will print hello Alice. That's how basically we use. So props can't be changed by receiving components. So do make sure that when we receive it, these values cannot be changed. So I cannot change this value here. I can only print it. Okay, that's one rule of props in our React. Now let's talk more about state in a React. State is the heart of React. It lets your components become dynamic and responsive. In this example, we are creating a counter that updates in the real time whenever you click on a button. Powerful, yet very simple. So we do have a component called counter. We create a variable called constant and we define our state values is equals to useState angle bracket 0. This is where state is coming. It is used to store and manage dynamic data. Use the useState hook to manage the state in function components. So this is where we have managed our hooks components. And then again we use a return statement because we need to return a component and it needs to have what we call HTML content area. But because this time we are using multi-line HTML content area, we are using the bracket start and bracket close. So if you want to use multiple statements, you can use bracket start, bracket close and write multiple HTML lines. If it's a single line, then these brackets are not needed. Here we are using div pcount count value. Okay, so this count value actually comes from here. So this count variable value will be read here. Then we say button on click. So when you have a button on our React app, we create an event on it called on click. Again, bracket start, bracket close, indicating JavaScript expression. So in React, when we want to use JavaScript for expressions, we use these curly brackets. So we declared a arrow function. We said set count count plus 1. So now we are using this set count function here. So this set count comes here as a function. So this is actually managing the state dynamically. So we dynamically created a function, we gave it an argument called count, we add one value to it. So every time user clicks on a button, this function is called, it adds value plus 1 to the current value of count, and that count value is printed here. It's managing the state, ensuring that the data is dynamically there and the value of these variables is maintained, so it remembers the value of count. So see how simply it is done and how powerfully it works. This is how we try to manage the states of any components, any buttons, anything that we want to keep in our app. As long as the web page is loaded, we want to manage the state, remember the name, remember the login details, remember the button values, remember the variable values. We use state in this order. So this becomes our typical syntax of it. There's a variable, there's a state count function that we have used here. Next, let's talk more about event handling in React. I just show you an example of on click already, but again we have various other ways of managing events. So through events we handle user actions like clicks and inputs. Interactivity is what React excels at. With event handlers, you can make your components respond to users' actions, like clicking a button or typing in a box. Here we are logging a simple message to the console when a button is clicked. So we again create a React component called handle click. We say go on to console.log, again a simple JavaScript. We say button click. So every time user clicks on a button, this component is called. So we go inside a button using an HTML. On click event is created, a simple HTML code. Then again curly brackets indicating our JavaScript expression, and then we call this handle click component. See, note there's no brackets needed here now because we are directly calling a component. It doesn't need to have the brackets. So it's going to call this component here. Now this means that every time I click on a button, this component will be called, which in return will actually call this component, and then it will print but console.log. This way you can have any state, any functionality within your code. How simply it's managed, how beautifully it's managed, how easily it can be controlled. Okay, so similarly you can have on click, on change, on key press, on key release, whatever events you want to handle, you can handle by very simply using the standard JavaScript on click and then expression and then calling the component that you want to be executed when the button is clicked. Wow, wonderful, right? Now let's talk more about how we handle forms. So forms and control components in React. Forms are a staple of web development. Every web page standardly needs a starting from a login form to registration form to many other various different ways where forms are involved. With control components, React ensures that the form inputs are always in sync with the app's current state. This example showcases a form that updates the user's name in real time. So for example, if you have a problem that says create a form to collect and display user's name. To do that, again we created a component, form example, bracket start, bracket close. We declare a constant, we set a name variable and a set name function, and we defined a use state. So this will ensure that we are maintaining the state. Then we declare another variable called constant, handle change, and then we declare an event, which is again default event handling by React, arrow function, set name, again this function is called here event.target.value. So when I create a form, return form input.text, so I have a value, name, on change, handle change. So when the value is changed, it's actually going to call this name parameter. Then as soon as I change the value, that dynamically the content is updated and the event is validating the things. So it dynamically shows hello whatever name you are writing. So as you are writing the name, your name gets updated on the field. So we on the text field, we are calling the value and we are using this expression called name. And then on change event is triggered here. This on change event in this case is just simply displaying the name, but then you can change it to do whatever you want. So in other words, check the value, check whether the data exists in the database. As I type a, find all the elements or the data or the users that have a name. Whatever events you want to target, you can easily go and put them inside the function here. So we declare a handle change event. that basically gets executed every time an event is triggered. Okay, so because of this, we actually are executing the function every time event is occurring. Make sense? Hopefully do. So again, quick examples of how these things work. So this is very intuitive way of managing events and form controls. We can control not only the input fields but any other component for that matter as well using the same thing. The value is dynamically updated by the user. So every time user enters something here, on change event is called. On change will actually trigger this thing. Using the state management, we maintain the previous characters that the user had entered. That way my state is maintained. If you don't do that, it means every time you press A, an event is triggered. That event will actually cancel out the value. So you need to ensure that you keep on entering more values. To do that, we manage the state so that technically your state is managed and you can enter multiple characters. More of React, we use something called React Router for navigation. React Router is like a GPS for your app. It helps users navigate between different pages without refreshing the browser. With links and routes, you can easily structure your app into a logical sections. That's the major advantage of using React Router. So for example, if we have a problem that create a simple app with a home and about page. So with the same thing, we can go and we can import browser route as a router. So we need to include this import statement. Then we say route and link, provide two other parameters for this router functions from React router.dom. So in other words, this React route has already been created and we are importing the library for it from this React router.dom application. So all the content are imported here as browser router. So now what we need to do is we need to use these components here. To do that, we come here and we say function app. So we create our function. It returns, again, the first rule of components. It needs to have a function and an app name, and then it needs to return a value, and that value has to be something called an HTML. In this case, we created a router function. Then we say link go to home page. So we create one link. Then we create link go to about page, create another link. This is simple HTML kind of a concept. But now we are using the router tags, not the HTML tags. The route path backslash exact component home and the route path about component home. This is where we provide the navigation path to that where we want to take the components to. Through this way, we manage our app's navigation between different pages. So user can navigate between pages on the same browser's web area without actually having the need to refresh. This way, your web pages are loaded more dynamically, more accurately, and much more faster, having you and giving you a easily a logical structure of various different sections, even within the same web page. So it's very important and essential concept within our React. Next, let's talk more about React hooks, useState and useEffect. Hooks bring React to life. With useState, you can add interactivity, and with useEffect, you can handle tasks like fetching the data or reacting to its changes. They are a game changer for functional components in our React. So for example, we have a problem that log a message whenever counter is incremented. Okay, so whenever a user increments a counter, we want to log a message for it. To do that, again, we create a component app bracket start bracket close. We define constant count as a variable, set count as a function, and we use state, again, the standard state management in React. Then we say use effect. Again, as I said, this is the second part here. So use effect, it allows us to handle tasks like fetching data. So this use effect, we will fetch the data or react to certain changes or anything that's happening. So in this case, that happening thing is the count fetcher. So we are saying, hey, when something is changing, use effect function is called or component is called with an arrow function, bracket start bracket close, console.log count updated. So update the value of count. Notice the dollar sign here, bracket start bracket close. So it's printing the value of count here dynamically and then updating the value of count with the function. And then we return button on click. Again, we create an arrow function called set count, and we increment the value. So every time the set count value is updated, the value is managed in the set state. And because we are changing and some event has occurred, it automatically prints this message as well. So this allows us, or this is what we call hooks inside our React. These hooks allows us to manage various different things within our React app. In this case, we are using first managing the state, second managing the effect. Okay, so this effect will handle various different things, or in other words, reacting based on any change that is there, and we are maintaining the change through this use state feature. So use state is managing the change, any change that occurs, anything that's changing, maintain it, and then when there is a change, use the use effect function. That way we have complete control of what we want to do in our web page. So every time something is changing, keep a record of that, and then once we have a record based on that change, we call an use effect method. That effect method can have any data, anything that you want to do. So in this case, we're just simply printing the count value on our console. Understand? Hopefully do. So this is one other thing that's quite essential within our React. Next, we're going to talk about styling in React. For example, being able to change CSS and inline CSS styles of an HTML component. To do that, in React, you can use regular CSS or inline CSS styles. Inline CSS style are JavaScript objects giving you the flexibility to calculate styles dynamically. So in this example, we are applying custom styles to a heading. So we create again another function for a problem that style a heading with a custom font size and a color using inline CSS. So that's what we're trying to target. So we say, hey, constant style is equals to color blue font size. So see, notice it's just the standard code. So we define a style parameter, behave like a variable in sense of JavaScript. This becomes our object, and this is again key and value pair, key and value pair. So key and a value pair, key and a value pair. We give this value to our object called style. Now to use it, we say, hey, return h1 style. Again, this is now HTML style attribute is equals to expression bracket start bracket close. So see this, almost everything we write of JavaScript inside these bracket angle brackets. So these brackets indicate that we are writing some JavaScript. What is JavaScript? We apply this style here. So we then pass this as an argument here. So now when this HTML will be executed on the browser, it's going to print h1 style attribute, again an HTML attribute is equals to this style. This will be dynamically replaced by this content here, which then basically means, hey, we are changing inline CSS. So this is how we process the inline CSS within our JavaScript using our JavaScript and React. Understand? Very nice and very easily handled. More advanced concepts. Now let's get a little bit more in depth of React. So in React, we have something called lazy loading. Lazy loading speeds up our app, even though name is lazy. But the way it works is that you code lazily and it improves the efficiency of your code. So lazy loading speeds up your app by loading components only when they are required. It's like just-in-time delivery service for your app's code. So for example, if you have seen websites like Apple's website or websites like Netflix or Facebook, you keep on scrolling. So you see there are so many posts, but those posts are not there all by default. As you are scrolling, the demand requires you them to recycle the components and the layout and then load the contents dynamically. So that's one way or one example of how lazy loading works. It loads the component only when they are needed. So Facebook, Apple's website, when they promote their website, you see it's a one large giant web page. As you are scrolling, their components are basically browsing up and next components are loading, giving you an illusion that it's like a complete big video. And as you are scrolling, the video is playing and the components are unfolding. The design is changing, the location is changing. It just creates amazing effects. Okay, so that's done through lazy loading. Okay, lazy loading. So for example, load a component only when it's needed, the basic structure. To do this lazy component loading, we again create a constant variable called lazy component is equals to we use something called react.lazy function. This function allows us to load the component when it's needed. To do that, we again use bracket start, bracket close. Inside this argument, we create an arrow function. We use import statement and we import our component, which we want to load at that specific moment. Okay, so see this, now we are dynamically importing another component and then using this lazy function, saving it in a lazy component. Then we create our own another component called main app. It returns and then we use this suspense tag. So now we are using the suspense tag, fallback, bracket start, bracket close, again JavaScript, and then inside it we use div loading. And then we provide our lazy component here. So this lazy component now becomes is now called here, again using the angle brackets, and the suspense tag is closed. This is a simple structure, a simple way of how you want to call this lazy function. So now wherever we call this in this particular way, only at this point the component will be loaded when this function is in a fallback situation. Until then, it's in a default point. So it dynamically loads the components as needed, reducing the initial load time. So if you see Facebook website or Netflix website, you see there's a huge list of components, but they are not loaded by default. As you're scrolling and browsing through, the components are loaded dynamically using the simple load component strategy. That's how the lazy component works in our React. Then we have something called higher order components in our React. This is again another advanced level things. So these higher order components are like decorators for components. They let you add functionality without changing the original component. In this example, we are added a logger to a track render. So for example, we say we have a problem, and then problem is that we need to add a logging to multiple components without the duplicating code. So this higher order component has been included that allows us to do that. So we again create a component called function with the logger name. We create something called a wrapper component. We call the return function and it returns a function called logger props. Bracket start, bracket close. Then it calls the console.log component rendered, return, wrapper component and the props. So what now it is doing is it's like behaves like a function that takes a component. So this wrapper component itself is a component and returns a new enhanced component used by adding. So for example, it's like we have one component here, but we want another component to be created, but we want to use this component inside here. So now we add this component here. So this becomes our wrapper component. Okay. So this wrapper component is worked inside the logger component. Make sense? Little bit, right? So to include another component in your main component, we call this thing here. So now we have a function called with logger wrapped component. We return the function logger. So it's like creating a component inside a component. Okay. So this function logger props, again taking one props, bracket start, bracket close, console.log, and then this function again returns another function here. So it's like this component is there. This component again has another sub function here. This becomes our with logger main component, and this here becomes the logger component. So with logger is the outer and the inner is logger. That way we enhance the functionality of one component and include it into another. So you can say that this is our component, but we want to enhance its functionality including its own features. Can be considered as inheritance, can be considered, but in React terms we call it higher order components. So we are incorporating one component inside another component at runtime. That's how the React components works. It enhances the functionality while adding the new features to an already created component. Okay. Now, finally, once we have all this, how do we deploy a React app? That's one of the most commonly asked questions. So once your app is ready, deployment is the final step to share it with the world. Platforms like Netflix make it incredibly easy to host and manage your React apps. A few clicks and you are live. So the basic steps we follow is that you build the app using the npm run build function. So this is the run build code that you need to use. So here type in our terminal npm run the build and it will build the file and create your final output. Simple as that. Host it, you can use the platforms like Netlify, Vercel or GitHub pages to host your newly built component. Steps for deployment on the GitHub is that you push the code to GitHub, you connect the GitHub repo to your Netflix, and then you deploy. Simple as. So give it a try. Let me know how you feel and how these steps help you out. If you have any problem, we'll try to solve it. Now let's try to solve some problems of React. For example, dynamically greetings with JSX, a live counter with state, multiple page app with React counter, global state sharing with a context API, and something called lazy loading components for optimized performance. These are 5 real world React problems that needs to be solved. Now in my future videos, I'm going to go into all these 5 problems and solve them. But before I do that, I want you guys to try it out. I want you to see how you actually try to solve these problems. Let me know if you understand them and if you want further clarifications. Keeping in mind, do follow along. This is one of the videos in multiple series. So I will be making all these 5 projects in my next videos. So do subscribe and follow along. So that concludes the basic session of React within almost half an hour. I believe we tried to complete it just to give you a complete overview of how React is and how it works and what things are. Let me know what you understood and what you did not understand. Anything else you want to add up to it. Keeping in mind, I will be making and I'm already making a detailed course on React using W3 Schools, and we will be working on these various different examples and demos as well. So I will be building complete React apps. Do follow along and subscribe to the channel. So finally, thank you for watching. Do subscribe, and if you like the video, please give a like and leave a comment. Anything you liked it, didn't like it, too fast, too boring, what else you want to know about React, what problems you are having with React, please do share, as I'm gonna make videos almost twice or thrice a week, so you can very easily get a response from me quickly in form of video. Okay, so also check out these cool videos that I already have on React and other technologies. This is Dr. Zeeshan signing off.